This is Craig Wesco recording for TCGplayer.com, and in today's instructional videos, we will be playing Orzhov Control in Modern. This is a deck that I kind of developed about a year ago, and the reason I made it originally was because I felt like Discard and Wrath of Gods were really good in the metagame. And I feel like the metagame as it stands right now in Modern, it has kind of come back to that. So a lot of the super aggressive decks like Burn and Infect are kind of on the decline, whereas a lot of the mid-range decks or decks with bigger creatures, so the Eldrazi, the Abzan Company decks, and even Affinity, decks that really kind of fill the board and go wide, or just play some large creatures. So I feel like Damnation and Wrath of God are especially good right now. And the other thing that's really appealing about this deck, or one of the other things, is that we get to play Hand Disruption. So we have 4 Inquisition of Kozilek and 2 Thoughtcease, which it may be correct to reverse that. I'm not quite sure yet. And then we have 2 more Duresses on the sideboard. So we have up to 8 discard spells in addition to Liliana that can tick up and discard. So we have a really good plan for disrupting the opponent's hand, which is really good against a lot of the combo decks in the format. So we see a lot of kind of go wide or mid-range type decks that are very focused on creatures. And then we have the decks that aren't doing that tend to be combo decks that are kind of vulnerable to this hand disruption Liliana plan. So I feel like the black cards are really good right now in Modern. And then of course I'm Craig Wesco, so of course I have to pair black with white. Fortunately, the white cards are also good right now. So we have Death Shadow as one of the top decks, and so we have Path to Exile and Fatal Push very good against that deck, especially Path. Fatal Push can kill Death Shadow, it can't kill some of the like Gurmag Angler and Tasigur, but that's okay because we do have the Wraths and the Damnations. We also have Liliana to help fight that fight. So the other cool thing that we have when we're playing white, in addition to the black, we have a lot of good token producers. So Lingering Souls is probably the best token producer in the format. So just really good value card, really good at grinding out games in the mid-range matchups against like Jund and Abzan, things like that. And also, this card becomes effective, very good, especially good whenever we have a way to anthem our team. So we have 2 Gideon Ally Zendikars, another card, great in the mid-range matchups. But you could also Emblem to make all your spirit tokens into 2/2s. The other card we have to effectively Emblem is Sorin, not Emblem, but Anthem. Giving our team +1/0 and lifelink means that we not only have 8 power worth of spirits off of a single Lingering Souls, but 8 power worth of lifelink. So that can really come in handy anytime when racing is an issue, or anytime where our life total starts taking hits. Like we have Thoughtseize, we have Shocklands, we have Fetch Lands. So our life total isn't necessarily going to be super high, whereas whenever we connect with a creature after plussing Sorin, then our life total, we get that buffer, which is very good in a lot of situations. So the another thing that this deck has, we have a lot of good land destruction. So we have 2 Tectonic Edge and 4 Ghost Quarters, and it's possible that's supposed to be reversed, given the way the metagame is shaping up. But anyway, we have 6 main deck land destruction spells, which really helps against Valakut decks, Tron decks, and just any deck that has creature lands, which is a lot of the mid-range decks have the creature lands. And we also have more land destruction in the sideboard. We have 3 Fulminator Mages, which come in those same matchups. And then we also have Liliana of the Veil, which is great in conjunction with the discards. So we can empty the opponent's hand pretty quickly and force them to play off the top of their deck, which is especially potent when combined with cards like Wrath and Damnation, because we get them to empty their hand, which means they commit all their cards to the board, and then we just wipe them all away. And so then they have, basically no hand and no board. They just have some lands, which we can also deal with. So we're kind of, we're not flawless victorying the opponent usually, but we are taking care of all of their threats and basically putting them in top deck mode in a lot of our games. And planeswalkers are able to really take advantage of those types of situations where we can just be making tokens and attacking and ticking up our planeswalkers and things like that. Then we also have Shambling Vent, gain some life, and also just a lot of games, Shambling Vent does a large part of our it's one of our primary win conditions actually in a lot of games. So we'll trade a lot of resources and get the opponent basically with no cards and no board, and then we'll just fire up a vent or two and just start smacking them with the vent, until we draw a planeswalker or something. So that happens a lot with this deck. Then we have the Orzhov Signet, just as kind of it's anti-Blood Moon technology, which is pretty sweet, but it also just kind of fixes our mana and ramps us. So we have like double black Liliana on turn 3, double black on 4, double white on 4, double white on 4. So we just have a lot of kind of double color spells. And then our sideboard we have Fulminator, double black. So it just helps us fix our mana and also accelerate us into our 4-drops because we have 10 4-mana spells, which is quite a lot. And Wall of Omens can help protect our planeswalkers by blocking. It just draws a card. We don't really have any synergies with it. I guess you can say that plussing Sorin is some synergy with it because it becomes a 1/4 lifelinker. But really, like we have no way to blink it or anything like that. It's just kind of a speed bump, does some blocking, protects our planeswalkers. It's just kind of I keep thinking about cutting it. I had Bitter Blossom over it at one point, and that could be correct. I'm not sure. And if the metagame continues to go away from the aggro decks, that card could be the card to cut. Fatal Push would also be on the chopping block in that scenario. But basically, the deck is a pretty controlling kind of tap out planeswalker deck. Very Shaheen Sarani like, just without all the blue card draw. Now, in the sideboard, we have ways to basically uh, basically take out the cards that we don't want in the matchups that they're not good in, and bring in cards that are good in those matchups. So in matchups where our removal spells aren't great, so like if we don't want so many fatal pushes and paths and wrath effects, well, in those matchups, we tend to want cards like Duress and more planeswalkers and land destruction. So we get to bring those in against like the combo type matchups. Living End is, we have Rest in Peace for that matchup and Fulminators. But then in general, though, we kind of have some bullet cards too. So Timely Reinforcements really good against mono red. So between 2 Timelies and 4 Sorens, we have a lot of ways to kind of not die to their burn spells. We don't have like a Leyline of Sanctity or anything like that to really close the door, but we can pretty effectively, stay out of burn range between these 6 life gain cards. Then we also have cards like Shambling Vent that could incidentally gain us some life. And then it comes in some other matchups, just because if they have a Bird of Paradise on the board, well suddenly we can pay 3 mana for 3/3s and then maybe gain 6 life also, or 3/1/1s. I'm sorry. And we do have anthems. We have 6 ways to pump our creatures with the 2 Gideons and the 4 Sorens. So we can make these. This could be 6 power worth of creatures for 3 mana, which is a pretty effective card in matchups where the opponents just have creatures on the field. Fulminator Mage, it's mostly for Tron and Valakut, but it can also come in really any matchup. Anytime we have cards, like too many cards that we want to bring out, we can bring it in. Duress helps in the burn matchup, helps against any of the combo decks. I sometimes bring in 1 copy in some matchups. Like I think I do that against Collected Company decks. Just some of the mid-range decks, anything with like Sphinx's Revelation, Cryptic Command, stuff like that. That could be an effective card in those matchups. Flaying Tendrils. This comes in quite a bit, and it's a very effective sideboard card. It's good against any of the Birds of Paradise stacks. It's good against Affinity. It's really good against Elves, and just really anything that tries to go wide but low to the ground as well. It's obviously not going to be good against decks that play a lot of big creatures like Eldrazi decks, but it's going to be very effective against any of the decks that try to play small ball. So it's one of our key sideboard cards. Engineered Explosives plays a similar role, but it's better against decks like Death Shadow, where they have 1 mana yet very potent threats like, well, Death Shadow. So that's kind of it's a card that can come in a number of matchups. I can actually kill a Blood Moon with it. I've done that before because even though we can only produce black and white mana, if we have like a Signet or a Plains and a Swamp, and we have fetches to set that up, then we're gonna our non-basics produce red, so then we can produce red, white, and black and blow up a Blood Moon. Grafdigger's Cage, it doesn't help against Living End, but it does help against Snapcaster Mages. It's extremely good against Collected Company decks, especially if they also have Court of Calling, because those cards don't work. It's good against Kitchen Finks Recursion. It can shut down Snapcaster Mages, things like that. So this card's a pretty effective card. It's been pretty good for me. And then we have 2 Rest in Pieces, which I think is it's definitely the better graveyard hate card, although, well, both of them do turn off our Lingering Souls. But the matchups where we're bringing them in tend to be the matchups where Lingering Souls isn't super good, and these cards are just like game breaking. So even though there is some anti-synergy there, it's well worth the price. Very good against Death Shadow as well. Turns off all their cards. All their delve cards become like impossible to cast. It makes Snapcaster Mage just an ambush viper. It turns off the graveyard part of Culligan's command, or if they have Tarmogoyfs, it turns those off. It does a lot in those matchups. And then of course against things like Living End or Dredge, this is our best card. Elspeth, she's been great in the mid-range matchups, especially. She's kind of the card that just dominates the board if you can get her out there. Very effective card, any matchup where the games go long. And then sometimes I'll just board her in if I'm boarding out too many cards, if there's just not enough effective cards in the matchup. And it's fine. Like, she's a great win condition. Even if her abilities aren't especially good in a matchup, sometimes you just want another win condition. And then the last card in the sideboard is Disenchant. So I think that I might want to split this with Oblivion Ring, just to give us a way to deal with a Planeswalker. But basically, this is good against Affinity, good against Blood Moon, good against sometimes the Prismatic Omen deck, that version of Valakut. Having disenchants can be a pretty handy thing, and I think it's a little bit better than Stony Silence in this deck, because since we have the Wraths and the Damnations in addition to the cheap removal, then we have Lingering Souls to deal with their flyers. We just are pretty well set up against Affinity already, that I don't think we need a card like Stony Silence to really devote to that matchup. And then also against Tron, another matchup where Stony Silence is good, we have like the Fulminators and the Tech Edges and the Ghost Quarters, so we're kind of good on that front as well. So we don't really have a need for Stony Silence in this particular deck, so I went with Disenchant instead, because I think that's the more versatile card. So this deck, it's pretty well positioned right now. I think it's poised to really to do well in this metagame. And we're going to do some videos, see it in action, and maybe learn some things.